As dusk settles over London, a quiet shiver creeps along the South Bank. Tourists gather near the water's edge, drawn by laughter, music, and the bright lights of modern performances. But just off the river's curve stands a timbered circle of shadows, the Globe Theatre. Rebuilt with reverence and precision, it proudly claims to honor the spirit of Shakespeare's stage. Yet beneath its carefully restored facade, there are things no actor rehearses for. Something watches from behind the curtains. Something walks where no footfalls should echo. Inside, the wooden floorboards groan with age, though much of it is new. Spotlights bathe the empty stage in a warm glow, but the corners remain untouched by light. The silence between rehearsals feels too heavy, as though the air remembers centuries of whispered lines, blood spilled under footlights, and tears shed behind velvet drapes. There are stories here that were never written, deaths that never made the history books, and hauntings that no tourist brochure will dare include. One security guard refuses to walk the upper galleries alone. A visiting actor once collapsed during a love scene and awoke unable to speak. And a woman, just a spectator, ran screaming from her seat after locking eyes with someone no one else could see. The Globe is a monument to genius, to language, to culture, but it is also a graveyard of passions, a place built on grief, rivalry, and unfinished endings. For some, the performance never ended. For others, the spotlight still burns. Tonight, we open the curtain on a truth long buried beneath the applause. We walk back through centuries of betrayal, obsession, and sorrow, guided only by those who have seen what lies behind the stage. This is the real horror behind Shakespeare's theatre. The original Globe Theatre opened its doors in 1599, built with timber from a dismantled playhouse and funded by Shakespeare's own company, the Lord Chamberlain's men. It stood as a bold declaration of artistic independence in a city teetering between enlightenment and chaos. Nestled in Southwark, then considered one of London's more disreputable quarters, the Globe rose amidst bear-baiting pits, alehouses, and brothels. It was a sanctuary for drama, but also a battleground for ambition, envy, and control. Theatre in the Elizabethan era was no safe endeavor. Performers were often seen as lowly, even criminal. Actors fought for roles, patrons, and survival. Audiences were unruly, sometimes hurling objects or storming the stage in drunken rage. Shakespeare's words may have risen above the din, but behind the scenes, the atmosphere was volatile. Some plays carried political danger, others stirred personal rivalries, and more than once, the Globe became a site of real violence, not pretend. On the 29th of June, 1613, during a performance of Henry VIII, a stage cannon misfired and set the thatched roof ablaze. The theater was engulfed in minutes. Official records state that no one was killed, yet contemporary letters suggest panic, stampedes, and the possibility of one or more unaccounted-for victims. Some say a young apprentice never emerged from the trapdoor chamber beneath the stage. His name, if it was ever written down, is long lost. The Globe was rebuilt the following year, only to fall again decades later under the weight of Puritan restrictions that closed down all theaters. The site was eventually built over, swallowed by time. Yet tales persisted, whispers of hidden passageways, secret deaths, and ghosts who never stopped rehearsing. When the modern Globe was reconstructed in the 1990s, care was taken to honor historical accuracy. But some believe something was disturbed. Foundations were poured over bones, ancient wood was cut, and the old theater, awakened by intrusion, began to speak again. The Globe may now be a jewel of British heritage, but its foundations were laid in blood and ambition, and the souls who once lived and died for the stage may still linger, unwilling to let go of the only place they ever truly belonged. Lawrence Temple has worked as a lighting technician at the modern Globe Theatre for nearly 7 years. Reserved and methodical, he has always taken pride in the precision of his work. But there is one night he never speaks of, unless asked directly, and even then, his voice falters when he remembers it. It was a late December evening, well past midnight. Rehearsals had wrapped, and Lawrence had stayed behind to recalibrate a spotlight that had been flickering during the final scene of Macbeth. The cast had gone. The halls were empty. Cold air filtered in through the timber slats, and the entire building had fallen into an eerie stillness. He was coiling a cable near the stage when he heard a dragging sound, slow and deliberate, coming from the area behind the curtain. Lawrence assumed it was a forgotten costume rack, or perhaps a stagehand returning for a misplaced bag. He called out. No answer. As he pulled the curtain aside, the temperature dropped suddenly. His breath misted in the air. What he saw stopped him cold. The deep red fabric was torn 3 vertical slashes, fresh, as though made by fingers. Beneath the tears, faint smears of something dark ran down the lining. When he reached out instinctively, his hand came away, stained a deep rust color. It was not paint. He knew that instantly. Then came the footsteps, not behind him, but below, from beneath the trapdoor stage. Soft, but heavy, pacing back and forth in a rhythmic loop. Thud, pause, thud. He froze. The spotlight he had come to fix flickered back to life, then burst in a loud pop of light. Lawrence dropped the cable and backed away. As he turned toward the exit, he felt something brush his leg. Not air, not cloth, something with weight. He ran, not stopping until he was in the street under a sodium lamp, panting. I'm not superstitious, he said later, his voice thin, but I know when I'm not alone. Whatever I heard down there, it was trapped, and it wasn't pretending. He refused to work after dark for the next 6 months. No one made him. They call him the Curtain Bleeder. No one knows his real name. There are no records of his death, no official mention in the theater's dusty archives. But those who work the globe, especially the ones who linger backstage, speak of him in hushed tones. They say he appears when tragedy is rehearsed, and always near the velvet drapes. The story passed down through whispered retellings begins in the early 1600s. A young apprentice actor, no more than 17, had landed a rare speaking role in Julius Caesar. It was his first performance in front of a paying audience. He was nervous. The company was divided. Jealousy festered between seasoned actors and rising talent, and on the night of the play, something went terribly wrong. The boy was supposed to fall during Caesar's assassination scene, stabbed with blunted props. But as he collapsed, he screamed a real scream, high and breaking. Blood soaked his costume. At first, the crowd applauded, thinking it was a brilliant display of realism. Only when he failed to rise did the horror set in. He had been stabbed for real. One of the blades had been switched. He died on the stage, eyes open, mouth still forming his final line. No culprit was ever found. The blade vanished. His body was buried quietly, some say beneath the theater itself. In the years since, several actors have collapsed during that same scene. One described a cold, wet sensation spreading across his torso, though he had not yet taken the stage. Another, a student performer, fainted backstage after seeing what he believed was a boy kneeling in front of the curtains, clutching his side and mouthing something silently. Stage managers have reported finding fresh, reddish smears on the curtains after rehearsal, only for them to vanish by morning. A costumer once followed bloody footprints into the trapdoor chamber. She found nothing, but she never returned to work. The curtain bleeder does not cry out or wail. He relives, over and over. His death was never acknowledged, and his performance never finished. Now he waits, caught in that final moment, reaching for help that will never come. Erin Collingwood was 26 when she visited London for the first time. A literature graduate from Chicago, she had long dreamed of standing where Shakespeare once directed his plays. The Globe was her final stop before flying home, and she had chosen to attend a late afternoon performance of Othello, one of her favorites. It was a cool spring evening, the kind where the air carries a hint of rain but never fully commits. Erin arrived early, wandered through the courtyard, took photos of the timbered walls and thatched roof, then settled into a seat on the upper gallery. As the play began, she was captivated by the intensity of the performances, the way the actors made the space feel alive. But what stayed with her wasn't the acting. At intermission, she left her seat to take photos from different angles, curious about the view from the higher rows. The theater had mostly emptied for refreshments, and she found herself alone in a corner of the gallery. As she lifted her phone, she noticed a woman sitting 3 rows down, dressed in what looked like an elaborate Elizabethan gown. Erin assumed it was part of a tour or perhaps an actor awaiting a cue. But the woman was speaking to herself, quietly, rhythmically, her mouth moving without sound. Her hands were clasped tightly in her lap, and her gaze never left the stage. Erin hesitated, then raised her phone to take a picture. At that exact moment, the woman turned. Her face was expressionless, but her eyes were unnatural solid black, with no white at all. Not glazed, not shadowed, but empty, endless black. Erin gasped and stumbled back against the railing. The woman didn't move, didn't blink, just stared. Then, as suddenly as she had appeared, she was gone. There had been no sound of movement, no exit, just an empty seat where she had been. When theater staff found Erin minutes later, she was crouched near the stairs, shaking uncontrollably. Her phone, which she had dropped, had erased every photo taken inside the theater. She never finished the performance. She has not read a line of Shakespeare since. "I felt like she knew me," Erin whispered afterward, "but I had never seen her in my life, and I hope I never do again." Long before the Globe Theatre was first raised in timber and nail, the land it stands upon was considered spiritually volatile. The south bank of the Thames was a lawless frontier far from the sacred halls of Westminster and beyond the reach of moral order. It was a place of blood sport, hidden rituals, and whispered curses. While Shakespeare brought poetry to the stage, the ground beneath it was already steeped in something older, something darker. Local folklorists and spiritual historians believe the area was once a convergence point for what they call emotional ley lines, natural flows of psychic energy amplified by intense human emotion. Joy, betrayal, lust, and violence, soaked into the soil through centuries of illicit revelry and unsanctioned gatherings. When the first Globe was built, they say it sealed that energy beneath the stage like a lid on a boiling pot. Some believe that the theater's foundation is cursed, not by spell or ritual, but by repetition. The same lines spoken year after year, the same betrayals reenacted, the same murders staged beneath the same rafters. Each performance, though fictional, feeds the loop, strengthening the echoes trapped within. There are even whispers of a rival playwright, Christopher Marlowe, placing a hex on the Globe after being excluded from its founding circle. Though dismissed by most historians, several early actors died under suspicious circumstances shortly after that feud. Whatever the source, the activity has only intensified since the modern reconstruction. Some say the spirits were at rest until the builders disturbed their slumber. Others claim they were always awake, waiting for the lights to come back on, for the show to begin again. Her name was Margaret Haywell, though few remember it now. Born into nobility in 1591, she was the daughter of a wealthy landowner from Sussex, known for her fierce intellect and an independence that did not suit her time. Against her family's wishes, Margaret developed a quiet obsession with the theater. She would disguise herself in modest clothing and sneak into performances in Southwark, clutching coin in her glove to pay her way in. It was during one of these clandestine visits that she met Edward Brome, a rising actor at the Globe known for his charm and talent. Their affair bloomed in shadows, letters passed behind curtains, stolen hours in the gallery. But Margaret wanted more than secrecy. She began to send money anonymously to the theater, funding costumes, lighting, and eventually helping Edward secure a coveted lead role. When news reached her that Edward had become engaged to a merchant's daughter, chosen for wealth and social standing, something in Margaret broke. On the evening of his wedding announcement, she returned to the Globe alone. Witnesses later remembered a woman in fine clothing, sitting motionless in the upper gallery during a performance of Romeo and Juliet. She never left her seat. Margaret was found hanging from the wooden beams at the gallery's edge, her gloved hand still clutching a note. The contents were never made public. Since then, actors and patrons alike have reported seeing a solitary woman in Elizabethan dress, seated in the upper gallery. Her presence is felt most during plays involving romantic betrayal or heartbreak. She does not move, she does not speak, but her gaze is unbearable. Those who meet her eyes often report a sudden wave of despair, followed by an overwhelming need to leave. In 2007, a visiting actor from New York broke down in tears mid-scene while delivering lines about lost love. He had no history of emotional instability. Later, he admitted he had seen a woman watching him from the shadows of the gallery, eyes fixed and unblinking. They say Margaret is still waiting for Edward to notice her, still mourning a love that was never made public, still trapped in the place where her heart was finally broken. In late autumn of 2022, a licensed paranormal research group from Bristol was granted overnight access to the Globe Theatre under strict conditions. The team, led by investigator Rachel Denning, brought high-resolution thermal cameras, audio recorders, motion sensors, and a drone rig, outfitted for low-light surveillance. What was intended as a controlled data collection session quickly turned into something else. The team began their session just after midnight. As temperatures dropped, they focused on the trapdoor chamber beneath the stage, known historically as Hell in Elizabethan theater terms. At 1:12 a.m., while recording ambient sound near the edge of the trap, the team's lead audio technician captured a voice. The playback, verified by multiple analysts, was clear and without distortion. It spoke just two words: "Stop him." No one had been speaking at the time. All members were accounted for. The voice was male, urgent, and close, as if someone had leaned in toward the microphone. Moments later, the lights along the gallery staircase began flickering in a pattern, though no electrical issue was found. The drone was launched to perform a sweep of the upper seating areas. While flying across the West Gallery, it briefly captured footage of a shadowy figure crossing the aisle and vanishing into the wooden panels. No team member was in that area. The figure moved without sound, its outline unsteady but human. The footage was time-stamped and stored, though the Globe has never approved its public release. Later that night, one of the camera operators, Tom Franklin, lost consciousness while alone near the prop closet. When revived, he described a vivid dream in which he was trapped in heavy, suffocating fabric, unable to scream. His eyes were red and leaking when he awoke. Rachel Denning concluded the site was exhibiting active residual phenomena with intelligent responses, one of the few locations in the country to meet that threshold. Before leaving, she walked onto the empty stage and whispered one line from Hamlet, just once. Something whispered back. Today, the Globe Theatre stands as a shining emblem of cultural pride. Visitors arrive in droves, eager to glimpse the stage that reimagines Shakespeare's London with such loving detail. Tour guides speak of artistry, of architectural integrity, of the vision that brought this place back from history's rubble. But behind closed doors, the staff knows there are parts of the Globe that never truly welcome the light. Certain corridors are avoided during evening rehearsals. Stagehands hurry through the backstage stairwell without looking over their shoulders. In the costume rooms, mirrors are kept covered at night, a tradition no one can explain but everyone follows. One lighting technician, assigned to reset rigs after hours, refused to return to the upper gallery following a night when he heard someone breathing directly behind him. He turned. No one was there. The building was locked. Actors speak in lowered tones about a weight that descends during certain performances. It is not fear, exactly. More like sorrow. Thick, inescapable sorrow. During a run of Hamlet, 2 performers experienced intense vertigo on the same night, during the same scene, both on opposite sides of the stage. Medics found no cause. Some blame the acoustics. Others say the stage remembers. In 2010, during renovations to reinforce the stage floor, a sealed cavity was discovered beneath the boards. Inside, a rotted chest, fragments of tattered cloth, and what appeared to be a child's writing slate were found. The items were removed for analysis, but staff reported a noticeable spike in electronic failures and disorientation in the weeks that followed. Several performances were interrupted by failing microphones and inexplicable cold spots in the audience. Today, much of this is quietly ignored. Maintenance logs remain vague. Complaints are dismissed, but those who work here every day understand the truth. The globe was resurrected to bring the past to life. In doing so, it may have also woken what the past left buried. The Globe Theater is more than wood and stagecraft. It is more than the lines recited, the applause echoing beneath its open sky. It is a living monument to human emotion, each performance layered with centuries of longing, betrayal, and unresolved grief. And in that emotional echo, something has taken root, something that does not fade with the closing curtain. For every laugh shared under its thatched roof, there is a whisper in the rafters. For every lover's vow shouted from the stage, there is a weeping figure lost in the shadows above. This place, built to honor memory, has become its prisoner. What remains after centuries of storytelling? Is it art, preserved in time, or something less visible, an imprint, a wound that will never heal? If tragedy is replayed enough times, does it become real again? Do the spirits of those who died too quietly return to speak through broken lights, shadowed corners, and blood on the curtains? Some say these are only stories, misunderstandings, tricks of the mind. But others, those who have felt the chill, seen the eyes, heard the voice no one else heard, know that something here endures. Something watches from just behind the stage. If you have ever walked these halls, sat in those seats, or stood beneath the weight of centuries of performance, ask yourself this: what if the curtain never truly comes down? We invite you to share your own experience, if you've had one. Subscribe to the channel for more true investigations like this. And remember, some places were never meant to be quiet, especially those built on the power of a voice that still refuses to be silenced.